would you reopen the Clinton investigation if you discovered new information?
It's hard for me to answer in the abstract. We would certainly look at any new and substantial information.
In general, if you discovered new information that was substantial and relevant, you would reopen an investigation, would you not?
I don't think we can answer that in the abstract. What we can say is if any investigation, if people have new and substantial information, we'd like to see it so we can make an evaluation.
Okay.
We know Comey is looking at new information now. The question is it substantial? We're going to talk about this more with two members of Congress who've gotten that letter from Mr. Comey, the Republican chair of the House Judiciary Committee, Robert Goodlatte, and the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff. Thank you both for joining us. And Mr. Chairman, let me begin with you. I understand you were briefed by Mr. Comey yesterday. What can you tell us about what he said?
Yes, John Conyers, the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, and I both had the opportunity to speak to Director Comey yesterday. We both encouraged him to make sure that the American people have as much information as possible before they have to make a decision on November 8th, based upon this stunning new development that the Bureau is examining new evidence in this case that they said they had completed several months ago. So that's very important. But we also asked him, I asked him, if he could do that based upon the fact that much of this is classified material and based upon the fact that he cannot in any way jeopardize the investigation. He did not give us any response in terms of what more he could say, but he certainly took that under advisement. I also asked him what the status was of the referral that I made along with Chairman Jason Chaffetz of the Oversight Committee of potential impeachment potential perjury charges to be brought with regard to Mrs. Clinton, and he deferred to the Justice Department itself. He did not answer that question as well. But when people talk about protocol, we haven't heard from the Justice Department about that in 3.5 months since that letter was sent.
I want to get to Congressman Schiff, but let me follow up with one thing there. You mentioned classified information. How do you or Mr. Comey know that there's classified information involved here if you haven't seen the emails?
Well, we don't know, and we don't know what the basis was for Mr. Comey making the decision to further pursue the case. We don't know whether it's informants. We don't know whether they've had access to looking at some of this information. We don't know what the basis was. We do know they know something is there, and as you saw in the lead-up clip you had, he said he would reopen it if there was substantial new investigation materials. And so that's what I think we're looking at here.
Several Democratic senators have called on Mr. Comey to give Congress more information by tomorrow. What more do you want to see?
Well, it's very hard to say, George. And at the outset, I think this was a terrible error in judgment by the director to release this kind of ambiguous letter. These may be pertinent, they may be significant, they may not be significant, they may not be pertinent. That kind of an ambiguity bomb this close to election was a terrible lapse in judgment. The DOJ policies against making a statement about a pending or closed case, and certainly not doing it in the days leading up to an investigation, is there for a reason. It's designed to ensure fairness. It's also designed to ensure that the FBI is not put in a position of appearing to put its hand on the political scales. And this may or may not have been in the director's interest, but it clearly wasn't in the public interest. What is the public to make of this letter? And how is the secretary to defend against this kind of innuendo? So I think it was a terrible mistake. I do think the director ought to do his best to clean it up.
How?
But it's hard. Well, that's the thing. It's hard to see how he can. These are emails he hasn't even seen. We don't know when he'll have the opportunity to see them. But I would think if the director can't clean this up, if there isn't sufficient information he can give, I think he needs to level the American people and acknowledge he's made a serious mistake. And there's nothing he has seen that should alter the core conclusion he reached earlier that there is no reasonable prosecutor that moved forward here. Because the reality is, in the absence of knowing what the emails say, in the absence of knowing whether they're significant, he shouldn't be casting doubt or innuendo in this kind of way that doesn't put the secretary in a position where she can even defend against this kind of ambiguity.
Chairman Goodlatte, did Mr. Comey tell you he would be coming forward with more information?
He did not. His answer was, with regard to a number of questions I asked him, that he was not going to answer those questions at this time, meaning during the conversation I had with him and Mr. Conyers. But let me just say, with regard to Mr. Comey making a mistake, I think that he is very conscious of the controversy that has existed in the FBI and in the Justice Department. I've talked to FBI agents, former FBI agents, prosecutors, former prosecutors, who have scratched their heads and been very concerned about how the investigation was conducted and the conclusion that was reached 3.5 months ago to not indict. And wasn't it very wrong for the Attorney General to get on board a plane in Arizona with Mrs. Clinton's husband, the former president? The director is the head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, not prosecution. Why was he stepping forward to announce that decision in the first place, rather than somebody in the Department of Justice who handles prosecutions and make those decisions?
Okay.
Why was 5 of her aides given immunity from prosecution? Why was a part of the immunity agreement to destroy laptops that contained this information after they looked at it? Why were those people allowed into the room with Mrs. Clinton when she was interviewed by the FBI? There are many, many questions, and I think the director is very conscious of this, and he feels, I think, in a very difficult situation, but one in which he thinks that, given the fact that Mrs. Clinton has been traveling around the country for 3.5 months saying that the FBI has cleared her of wrongdoing, that when there is new and, I believe, substantial information available,
well, Congressman,
why wouldn't he tell the American people that this is still under investigation?
He did make that conclusion. Congressman Schiff, you get the last word.
Well, the fact is that in July, the director said no reasonable prosecutor would move forward, and there's nothing that we have been shown, nothing the director has said to alter that conclusion. And the fact that the director now says that there may be additional emails that could be significant or not doesn't change that fundamental conclusion. And I think to inject this kind of uncertainty this late in the day was a terrible lapse in judgment. If the director can't clean up this mess, and I hope he will try, I think he ought to acknowledge that he made a serious mistake and underscore once again that there's nothing that alters that core conclusion he reached in July. But there was really no excuse for dropping this kind of ambiguity into the race. Those DOJ policies are sound and they exist for a reason. And while I can understand, George, why in the extraordinary circumstances of closing out the case in July, he felt he needed to explain the reason why, the steps he has taken thereafter in providing interviews in drips and drabs to Congress and this latest missive and the leaks that are now coming from the department, I think don't reflect well on the director or the Bureau, and I think are a serious mistake.
Gentlemen, thank you both very much.